Hello boys and girls, welcome to my channel. I'm for Classic and welcome to BenchART. So for today what I do have needed is Battlefield 6, the open beta. Yeah, I know I'm coming a little bit late, but I didn't pre-order the game, which didn't really grant me early access in Thursday. I also have been out of home for the entire weekend, so I only had time today. But I thought to myself, well, maybe these guys want to know how the game plays on the Ryzen 5 3600X and an AMD RX 6700 XT. And the good news is that it runs actually surprisingly well. I wasn't really expecting it to run as well as it runs. I didn't really check it out too much about the game's performance. I've only seen hardware unboxed video, and I've noticed that a lot of high-end Ryzen CPUs were having like 200 to 300 frames per second. So I thought to myself, well, strange, it seems very well optimized. Let's see how it runs on my Ryzen 5 3600. And surprisingly, what you need to know is that this CPU bottlenecks the game at around 70 to 80 frames per second, in some occasions 60s. So you can notice that the overlay is different than the usual. This is because I wasn't really able to put MS Afterburner to work in this game for some reason. I'm not sure if it is related with Javelin anti-cheat or not, but MS Afterburner didn't work out for me. Maybe it did work out for many people, but for me I lost a little bit of time and it wasn't really possible. So I'm just using Steam overlay in here, which is on the top part of the screen, which is also pretty good, but it's not as visible as MS Afterburner like I usually use. Okay, and one of the things that you notice is that at 1080p high settings with native TAA, CPU usage it is at 100%, sometimes even more. That is when the turbo it is being used and going overboard. So maybe not just the turbo but the PBO. It's like the CPU is auto overclocking or something to try to reach more frequency than the usual. And you can notice that regarding VRAM, the game doesn't make use of 8GB of VRAM. It's very close to that, so people with 8GB of VRAM might be okay. And when it comes to GPU usage, we are being bottlenecked in here. So all the frame rate that you are seeing in here, like the 90s, like the 70s, like 69, 64, this is all the limitation of the CPU. Okay, I'm having in here like 20%, 30% of GPU not being utilized because I'm using this CPU, which means that if you have a better CPU than what I do have in here, with this same GPU, you can expect your frame rate to be around 20 to 30% better, okay, while using these settings. So I think it's actually pretty good, okay. And despite the CPU bottleneck is always a bad thing, I'm having above than 60. So for me, I think it is okay, but for people targeting higher frame rates, it's not great, okay, in that sense. People with high refresh rate screens and stuff like that might feel a little bit limited by the 60 frames per second, 70, 80 on their PCs and might want to upgrade their CPUs. And if you do that, your GPU can actually handle that upgrade. But keep in mind that I'm also recording with OBS and that penalties slightly the performance. Nothing really special, to be honest. But I'm surprised because in the past, I remember like when Battlefield 4 was released and Battlefield 3, I had a Phantom 2 X4, which was a quad-core CPU from AMD at the time. And I remember that when Battlefield 4 was released, maybe Battlefield 5, I started to have some massive bottlenecks in there. And when it was on a 64 map player and with everything exploding and everything, the CPU struggled to sustain those 60s. So I was having like 40, 50 frames per second. And so I'm very surprised that Battlefield 6 doesn't seem to be trying to be super demanding. It doesn't seem to be using ray tracing in here, just like Battlefield, I believe, 5 did. They are not trying to use ray tracing, they are not trying to be overly demanding in here, they are not trying to do anything related to that. Regarding CPU, despite the bottleneck, it seems very well optimized because there is a lot of physics destruction, a lot of stuff is going on screen, particles everywhere, everything exploding. I mean, it's Battlefield and it's running awesomely. Okay, that's the surprising part. But probably you are tired of me talking about this, so let's move on and see how this game runs in different settings. Okay, just like the usual, I always bring up these quick splits about other settings that I did try out. And if you downgrade the game to 1080p median with FSR quality, of course the frame rate will be mostly the same. You get some extra frames because using median does alleviate a little bit the CPU usage. If you go with high settings, FSR on its quality mode, it's actually looked worse, but probably I was in the middle of a big fight, so yeah. But again, CPU is on the limit. And if you go with 1080p Ultra, there is still some bottleneck. So, but there are some moments where it does drop below than 60 when using Ultra. So pretty much all the settings that you can go with 1080p, the Ryzen 5 3600X will bottleneck you. Okay, so if you want to go with Ultra, just go ahead. But in some situations where the game it is more demanding for the GPU, it might drop below than 60. But if you have a variable refresh rate screen, I believe it will be okay. So moving on to 1440p, my recommended setting it is for going with high settings, but instead of using native TAA, I'm just using FSR quality. So the performance level that you can expect with these settings, it will be mostly okay the same as 1080p with a high native, except that you saw in here some drops to more than 60 at the beginning, and that was CPU bottleneck. So yeah, CPU might drop sometimes with more than 60, but it only happened to me when I was recording. Without recording, I think it was fine. I didn't find out any situation where it did drop more than 60, but I mean, it's impossible to replicate stuff in here. Every time, despite I did use always the same map, every second is different than the other, so it's hard comparison. But like you are seeing in here, 1440p high settings with FSR on its quality mode, it's just providing a very good frame rate. And GPU usage, it is around 85%, 80, 70s. So it's again the same story as the 1080p high. If you have a better CPU, you can expect a better frame rate because the GPU in here have some overhead that you can use to benefit a little bit the performance. So let's move on to other 1440p settings in here, just to make it quick. Okay, so as you can see, I also tried the game at 1440p mid with FSR on its balance mode. Performance is the same as you can see. 1440p high with TAA Native. The performance feels the same, but you are going to start to be GPU bottlenecked, so in occasions with a lot of smoke and a lot of effects and stuff going on, it might drop below than 60 more often. And 1440p ultra settings with FSR on its native mode. The frame rate it is more prone to drop below than 60, so basically I have most of the time in between 50 to 70. If you have a variable refresh rate screen, it should be okay, but it's tough, you know. The GPU starts to be the limitation, and if you change to a different CPU, you might not get too much of a benefit. So as you can see, I already moved on to 4K, and when it comes to 4K, my recommendation it is to go with median settings while using FSR on its performance mode. FSR in performance mode, it's essentially upscaling from 1080p to 4K, and this is a little bit more GPU bound than the other settings that I did recommend. As you can see, performance is above than 60, but GPU usage it is much more higher this time around, so it's about 90% in here, something in between 80 to 99%, but it can hold up above than 60. Okay, so I think it's a nice recommendation that I did put in here in case you want to try out. Okay, let's move on to other 4K settings. Okay, this is the end, the last settings that I did try out. So 4K high settings, FSR on balanced. You can see more or less the same frame rate in here, but it's lower than 60. I don't recommend. Battlefield is very fast paced. 4K high settings with FSR in quality mode instead of balanced. Seems to be running the same, but I believe it's mostly because I was on an area with much less action. So I do believe that, yeah, it will be obviously worse than FSR balanced, especially because both of high settings FSR balance and high settings FSR quality, the GPU starts to be the limitation, finally. And then you have 4K Ultra with FSR Native. And this is really the limitation of the GPU. What you get it is a 30 frames per second experience, which I obviously do not recommend, okay? So, recapping everything. 1080p, high settings native is my recommendation. If you have a better CPU, you can have much better frame rates. 1440p, my recommendation is high with FSR, but you are free to go with high without any FSR at all. It's up to you. But again, if you go with 1440p high with FSR, if you have a better CPU, you can extract some extra performance. 4K, my recommendation it is medium with FSR on its performance mode. A better CPU can extract a couple of more frames, but it won't be as much as with 1080p and 1440p. Okay, so I think that's all that I want to talk about Battlefield 6. I'm very surprised with the performance and the fact that DICE doesn't seem to be hunting the best graphics and everything. It seems that they focused a little bit more on the destruction. It seems they have much more destruction than previously what they had, at least on a smaller scale. A lot of things can be broken on the buildings. It seems to be more like Bad Company 2, but more dense, because Battlefield Bad Company 2 used to have like separated houses and some buildings here and there scattered throughout the map, but this one seems to be very concentrated. It seems like in the middle of the city you can put down any building. Of course everything is scripted. I mean the destruction, I mean you can RPG like 2 or 3 buildings and only then it will fall to the floor, but the physics will be always the same, okay? You don't expect like being toying with any brick on the floor. That's not possible. But I mean, it's still one of the games with more destruction out there when it comes to the combat. Unfortunately, I do suck with it. There is a lot of confusion and stuff going on. I used to enjoy this, but I mean, for today, and given that my mouse is a little bit broken, it's an hard thing to enjoy. And also I'm older, so I don't have the reflections that I used to have. So guys, I think that's all that I want to talk about Battlefield 6 Open Beta. Hope you did enjoy these tests, and I do hope to see you soon. Goodbye.